Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a really fascinating paradox at the heart of crypto. How can a technology that's built on being totally transparent ever work for businesses that absolutely need financial privacy? Well, a solution might finally be here. Let's get into it. Okay, so let's set the stage. The very thing that makes blockchains so revolutionary, this public, transparent ledger where everyone can see everything, is also, kind of ironically, a huge roadblock. I mean, just imagine trying to pay your employees' salaries or settle a huge invoice with a supplier when all the details are out there for your competitors to see. It's a total non-starter, right? Businesses need privacy to function, and that's the core paradox we're looking at. Now, this big, abstract privacy problem, well, it created a very real multi-billion-dollar headache for one of the biggest names in the space, Cardano. For years, even with its amazing tech and super passionate community, it was struggling with this massive gaping hole in its ecosystem. And just look at the numbers here. The difference is pretty staggering. Back in late 2023, Cardano had just a little over $36 million in stablecoins. Meanwhile, its competitors, Ethereum and Solana, were swimming in billions. This wasn't just a small gap. Cardano's entire DeFi world was basically a liquidity desert. It was starved of stablecoins, which are the absolute lifeblood of modern crypto finance. So why the huge gap? Well, it wasn't because nobody was interested. It was actually a fundamental technical mismatch. You see, the big stablecoin companies like Circle, they have to follow regulations. And that means they need the power to freeze assets if they're tied to illegal stuff. But Cardano is built differently. Its architecture, called UTXO, basically treats funds like digital cash in your pocket. It's incredibly secure, but it also makes it really hard for a central company to just reach in and freeze someone's funds. And the cost of that technical mismatch? It's just massive. You're looking at it right here. Cardano was essentially locked out of this $70 billion pool of liquidity from USDC alone. That put a very real ceiling on its growth and stopped its DeFi ecosystem from ever really taking off and competing on the world stage. Okay, so that was the problem. Now, let's talk about the solution. A new kind of asset that wasn't just built to bring money to Cardano, but to solve that bigger privacy issue we started with. And this is where something called USDCx enters the picture. So the first thing to get is that USDCx isn't trying to compete with the USDC we all know. It's more like an evolution of it. It's still backed one-to-one by regular USDC held in a secure vault. The real game changer here is the technology it's built on, these things called zero-knowledge proofs, that basically wrap every transaction in a layer of privacy, all while making sure it still follows the rules. This table really breaks it down nicely. Standard USDC, totally transparent. USDXx, encrypted. And for compliance, instead of that direct on-chain freeze that Cardano couldn't do, USDXx has this really clever workaround. Tokens can be removed from circulation, but it's done through a verified request system. It was literally designed from the ground up to be the perfect bridge between what Circle needed and how Cardano was built. So you're probably wondering, how does that actually work? How can something be totally private and totally compliant at the exact same time? It sounds kind of like magic, right? Well, let's pull back the curtain and look at the tech that makes it all possible. It's actually a really elegant three-step process. Think of it like a secure portal between blockchains. First, you lock up some standard USDC on a chain like Ethereum. Second, a verification service confirms that deposit and sends a cryptographic proof. Think of it like a digital receipt or an attestation over to the Cardano network. And finally, Cardano uses that proof to mint the exact same amount of the new private USDCx. So every single USDCx is fully backed, but all the private stuff happens on the Cardano side. And that magic ingredient I mentioned, it's a technology called zero-knowledge proofs, or ZKPs for short. This is a massive breakthrough in cryptography, and it's what allows for this idea of auditable privacy. It's really the key that unlocks this entire system. Here's a super simple way to think about it. Imagine you're trying to get into a bar. A ZKP is like showing the bouncer a special pass that proves you're over 21, but it doesn't show your name, your address, or your actual birthday. You prove the one fact that matters, that you're old enough, without revealing any of the other sensitive data on your ID. That's a ZKP. Now, all this powerful tech lives on a new specialized blockchain called Midnight. You can think of Midnight as Cardano's dedicated data protection layer. Its whole reason for existing is to solve what some people call the privacy trilemma, that really tricky balancing act of making something private, programmable, and compliant all at once. On Midnight, transactions are private by default, but you have the ability to selectively reveal just enough information to prove you're following the rules. Okay, let's zoom out to the bigger picture here, because this isn't just about Cardano anymore. This one stablecoin could actually start to change the entire economic landscape of crypto. You know, someone on Reddit actually summed up the whole strategy perfectly. They said, Cardano/Midnight just became the privacy tax collectors for all of crypto. And that quote really highlights this completely new and fascinating economic model. This is what's being called the toll booth model. So instead of trying to beat Ethereum or Solana at their own game, Cardano is positioning Midnight as this essential privacy service that all blockchains can use. It's kind of like Amazon Web Services. AWS hosts websites for thousands of different companies, even its own competitors. Midnight wants to be that same kind of go-to foundational infrastructure, but for compliant privacy. So here's how Cardano actually makes this work for them. Every single private transaction that uses this system pays a tiny fee to the Midnight network. This in turn creates real demand for Midnight's own tokens. And here's the kicker. Because Midnight is anchored to Cardano for its security, all of this activity from all across crypto ultimately circles back and strengthens the entire Cardano ecosystem. And this brings us right back to that huge problem we started with, getting big institutions on board. A recent survey showed that almost half, 45%, of institutional investors say that privacy is very important to them. They absolutely need it for things like running payroll, making B2B payments, or executing their trading strategies without tipping off the market. This solution is basically tailor-made for what they've been asking for. So this whole development really leaves us with a fascinating question about where finance itself is heading. Are we moving towards a kind of hybrid model? A world where transactions are settled on these super secure public blockchains, but the sensitive details are kept private by default, all while being perfectly auditable and compliant for regulators. It's a really powerful idea, and now it's finally being put to the test.